I loved your takeaway, your key to a stronger marriage, all that stuff.
Thank
Being
you.
mindful of your emotions, I have to say, has been a huge thing for me that I learned about 15 years ago. Is and I look back before that, I'm like, how did I make it through life with not knowing how I feel, just
Yeah.
being like the puppet of my of my emotions? Do you have um do you get a lot of clients who that is kind of like a moment for them?
Yeah, I think especially around parts language, as I was bringing into conversation today, to notice that it's not all of you and that there's hope that's not you, that's just a piece of you, and to slow down and notice that piece. Absolutely, these kind of aha moments of, oh my God, there's hope. I'm not this bad person if they feel shame. There's just a part of me that feels shame, right? And so, yeah, definitely. And myself, I've experienced it as a client, and that was kind of what drew me to the work, was my own moments.
Oh, so you went through this too, and then this is the key, and wanted to share that with more people.
Yeah, I didn't go into IFS training until this past year. It was something I experienced as a client 2 years ago, and I wanted to deepen my work as a therapist. So I thought, hey, let's go further into this. It seems to be really working.
Would you care to share that moment where you experienced that or the situation? I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to.
Yeah, yeah, that's totally fair. So I believe that every therapist should be engaged in therapy. It's becoming a little bit more normalized, but it's strongly encouraged in at least the spheres that I run in. And so the therapist I happened to get connected with a few years ago did this thing called IFS, and I didn't know what it was. And the first time he was using parts language with me, I genuinely thought it was so strange. I was like, what does he mean? Like, he asked me, how old does this part feel in your system? And in other words, this part was from when I was 10 and it's still kind of running the show. And I was like, oh, this guy's super weird. I'm never coming back. And then I drank the Kool-Aid, and I think it's so, so wonderful. And it's evidence-based, right? Like, it's been proven to help people not only with mental health concerns, but also to release some physical symptoms like rheumatoid arthritis. It's been associated with releasing these like physical symptoms because these parts of us are like frozen in our, metaphorical and then literal systems. But yeah, it's wonderful.
I mean, I when I discovered this, I felt like, gosh, this is something that I feel like men miss out on in our culture is just being aware of their feelings or their parts. Um, did you run into that too with your clients?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think it, not all the time, but I would say more often than not, and this lines up with the research on it, that men are maybe a little bit less used to being asked these questions and deepening on what it really means to feel certain things. And so it can take a little bit more time to get there. And it's so beautiful when it happens if there's openness.
Yeah, I would say that just socially, we're discouraged from sharing our feelings. Like, I can't call my bud and be like, "Hey, let's go have lunch. I want to share with you my feelings." Like, I would just kind of get a
Yeah.
weird look. But I had to learn to trace back. I mean, years ago, just learning like, oh, why am I upset today, or why am I really happy, and tracing it back to the moment or the thing or whatever it was, and then holding on to that and being able to process was such a huge leap.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
do you have do your clients kind of go through that, or like are they just like you said they're just identifying a part and they kind of label it and they give it like an age and things like that, or
Yeah, it's different for everyone, and I think everyone comes in with their own narrative on either parts, or if they're not connected with that, on their emotions. But yeah, I think like similarly, people will believe that the parts are them. So we hear things like, "I'm just an angry person," or "I'm just an anxious person." This is just who I am. And then when we can be hope merchants as therapists and break that down for them, I think that's when the shifts can start to happen.
Yeah, you mentioned this earlier where people have this idea, this idea of like, well, that's just who I am. And it's like, well, I think you're a lot more than that.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
that's so true. Like, I'm interested. Do you ever see the epiphany go off on them where they're like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm not just an anxious person or a whatever person.
Yes, absolutely. We see that happen when, so in a session, just to kind of deepen a bit more on the IFS piece, when we're connecting with a part of a client, we're also having the client sit in the seat of self. So we speak to the part as if it's kind of personified and maybe even externalized, or noticing like, where does the part live in your body? I'm referencing here because a lot of people will say the part is here, especially if it's anxiety in the chest. So we'll have conversations like, how do you feel towards that part? Even that one question, how do you feel towards this part of you? Oh, it's just a part of me. What? And I can have feelings towards the feeling. And then there's this shift that starts to happen in how they relate to their emotions.
Wow. This seems like it would lead too into, I love what your key was, the courage to be vulnerable. And that I think doing that is what would help somebody be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think so. I've seen it happen. I've experienced it myself. And it seems to just normalize that we have emotions and that we're not always going to be so like calm and level headed. Um, yeah. Yeah. It really just normalizes it.
I mean, maybe this is a redundant question, but why do you think people identify so much more with their emotions than rather than like having a personality? It's like you said, like, oh, I'm just anxious or I'm just angry or I'm just on edge or whatever it is. Like, why do we do that?
Mm, yeah.
Are we all just
Yeah. I
crazy?
think that I think it's a way to make sense of, or a way to try and make sense of, right? Like I don't begrudge the traditional mental health system for trying to make sense of concerns with things like the DSM and diagnoses and all of that. Like it's an attempt to understand, right? But our systems are just far too complicated to be distilled down to these kind of boxes, in my opinion. So it takes it a little bit deeper. And when we can understand the existence of certain parts, why they're there, it always shifts from there must be something wrong with me to, oh no, it makes sense why these parts came up because of this trauma, this lived experience, this whatever, million different reasons of why you are you, right?
Yeah, because when I was able to trace back what bothered me to the thing, and then I really think about it, oh yeah, it does trace back to like an earlier trauma or a situation you were in when you were younger that you're like, what is this? Um, this is just so revealing. And it just has to be really cool to watch and help people walk.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier too, a lot of times you get people and you're like, think about when you were clicking. Do you have any cool stories about that, or is there something common where people realize, oh gosh, we were clicking at this point?
Mm, yeah. I think when people feel like they're most aligned, a theme is that they are both feeling emotionally safe with each other. And what I mean by emotionally safe is that they felt it was okay to be whatever being meant. So just being could mean that they are exhausted from their day and they don't have it in them to have like a huge dialogue with their partner after work. And their partner doesn't take that personally because they're in what we'd say is self energy. It says, like, what do you need right now? And if they say, I need space, and they're like, perfect, we'll give that to you, all right, here's your water, here's your snack. And we'll kind of like take that distance and then come back. And it's just these moments where both partners are free to be imperfect with each other. And in that kind of like, it's perfect imperfection, right? They're like, okay, well now we can reunite when we're both feeling okay.
That is so true. As we are perfectly imperfect creatures, and yeah, the ability and the willingness to be vulnerable is actually kind of attractive in a weird way. And I think it does
Mm-hmm.
build the emotionally safe space
Yeah.
where you can just,
Yeah.
yeah, give me my water and my snack. I just want to lay down here for a minute, relax from the day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Something else you mentioned was about assuming what other people are going to say. And this has been, uh, I'm asking for a friend, but this is a situation where I've actually dealt with this where my wife and I will talk, and before I'm done, she's already like talking, and I'm like, what where are we going here? And I like how you gave that a label that, yeah, it's assuming what somebody else is going to say can make you feel completely unheard. Um, how do you help people walk through that?
Hmm. Yeah, feeling unheard is probably the major catalyst for separation and divorce, right? Feeling like you and your partner are just not speaking the same language. And I think when I think of assumption, I'm also thinking of speed of conversation. So when we're making assumptions, we're generally going too fast and we're not slowing down to notice, like, what are the signals my partner's sending me right now, even nonverbal, and what are the signals I'm sending to my partner. So a big thing, in my work with couples is like, how do we slow down the communication to be a little bit more observant, intentional, pick up on cues, asking about cues, even normalizing, hey, like, I feel like your body language just changed. Can you tell me about that? Or here's how I'm feeling about that shift I just observed. And you give them the chance to explain. Maybe they didn't even notice.
Yeah, sometimes you got to notice like the 7-year-old clinging to my side, asking for attention, and you're just trying to get
Yeah.
through the thing. Um, yeah, trying to balance out all the distractions and the things we have going on. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like being a parent too, like you have so many things pulling on you that you're just trying to get to the end of the conversation. But yeah, that can really lead to some issues. Um, Besides you going through therapy, what led you into this field, and what sparked this for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know I was speaking quite a bit to my therapeutic journey, but I don't think I started therapy till much later in my teenage years. And I didn't even click with the therapist then. I think I got deeper into it in my early 20s. So a lot of it growing up was observing, right? Witnessing, noticing that I was very empathetic and picking up on things that peers weren't necessarily picking up on, or even that parents weren't picking up on in relationships. So yeah, there was always this kind of awareness that I was noticing things that maybe the people around me weren't necessarily noticing. And then when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be an architect because I love art, and I thought, oh well, that's a good mix of maybe I can make some money being an artist. Turns out you need to be good at physics. I'm terrible at math, so that wasn't going to happen. But I saw a career counselor, and I scored equally and unusually high on intrapersonal skills, and she was basically like, yeah, like you should probably explore therapy and psychology, and you'd probably be pretty good at that. And that was the first time someone actually had named it to me. So I guess I would have been 15 at that time. Yeah.
Did you start looking for colleges immediately, or
Yes and no. I did go to university right after, but like right after high school, but I think there was parts of me that felt, here I am using parts language, parts of me that felt like impostery around that, kind of imposter syndrome around like, oh, I could be the one to sit and hold space. And once I leaned into that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going for it. And looking back now, yeah, exactly. Looking back now, um, there were definitely signs way earlier than 15. So I even have it on my website actually. I created psychoanalyses for imaginary friends when I was 6 years old. I would observe how often my friends got into arguments when I was in the third grade. So very interesting, I would say, behavior for a kiddo that had no idea she'd later become a therapist.
that's awesome. Well, I have one last question, and then That will be the last one. I like the name Mind the Gaps, and how did you come up with that?
Yeah, so that is rooted in my origins as being from northern England. And in England, in their underground, as they call it, the subway station, it says "Mind the Gap" everywhere. And I actually have a T-shirt that says "Mind the Gap." Growing up, my dad was like, "Oh, that would be such a cool band name, Mind the Gap." So I had this shirt, "Mind the Gap," and when I knew I was going to create my private practice, I was thinking like, "Wow, that's a cool name for a private practice," because it kind of encompasses the exploration, like be mindful, so mindfulness of the space between who we are, in the space between who we're becoming, through the space between our comfort zone and our growth zone, as I like to call it, and kind of ran with this metaphor of the train station platform, right? That the platforms are comfort zone, the trains are, ticket to the growth zone. And so I really just ran with that. But yeah, its roots are in England from my family.
When my wife was over there, Kirsten, that was something that stood out. She actually came home and told us, she said, it's the funniest thing, instead of like the crack or, here's watch your step, we say in America, we say mind the gap or something in whatever English. Yeah. She just heard that over and over. She just thought it was the funniest saying. It was mind the gap, mind the gap.
Mind the gap. Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple signs in the Toronto station platform. Actually, my friend took a picture of one and was like, nice marketing. So it's a whole thing, but yeah. So
that's cool.
Thank you.
So that we take it into mind the gap of our relationships, right? Mind it earlier than later. Mind the gap. Attention.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I made it plural as well, like mind the gaps.
Mind the gaps.
Right. That there's so many, and it can mean so many different things. And it's kind of shifted its meaning as I've been doing the work.
Love it.
I can imagine.
Love it.
It does.
Yeah,
mind the parts. Yeah, exactly.
That could go in so many directions.
Yeah,
totally.
Kirsten, thank you so much for taking time today and joining us. Man, it's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.